I don't know if you know this, but a game called Marathon was announced a little while ago. Some people are calling it the second Concord. Now, I don't think it's that bad, but I do have to say these character designs I think are a mess. I mean, don't get me wrong, like some of the elements are really good. Like this eyelid is kind of cool. It's got like a camera. The graphic design overall is hella polished, but despite the polish, something is missing. And I think that thing that is missing is meaning. That's something that happens with over-designed characters. There's no message, just a lot of noise. Good design answers 3 basic questions. What is it? What does it do? And why should I care? You can't stop people from asking these questions. They can't even stop themselves. And even if they could stop themselves, it's only a matter of time before their dad walks in on their pile of Digimon cards and says, "What is this shit?" An over-designed character is when those questions get buried under visual noise. More specifically, an over-designed character is one whose design elements hinder processing fluency or readability by introducing meaningless, distracting, or conflicting signals, which obscure the character's internal concept or category. I'll go into what all these terms mean, and then I'll be showing you how the characters in Marathon specifically are over-designed and how that makes them harder to understand and really harder to like. And at the end of the video, we'll tweak and redesign the character's worst offenders, Glitch and Void. Okay? A little disclaimer, anytime I start talking about objectivity in visual design, there's always somebody that has to comment, actually, art is subjective? Look, your appreciation of art is subjective. You're allowed to like what you like. Liking Marathon doesn't make you a bad person. I might question your taste, but no one is wrong for liking something. But when we're talking about human perception, well, buddy, you've just stumbled into the objectivity part of town. We can objectively measure and describe things that can be perceived. For instance, is Mario red? If you saw a ripe Mario growing next to a bunch of Luigis, 9 times out of 10, most people would pick the Mario. And why? Because red objectively pops out. And that's not subjective. That's just how human perception works. And so when we're talking about character design, we're tapping into perception. We're trying to figure out how we can make something that is perceived by an audience member. Who cares about our intent? No one will know that. They can only know what they see. So we're going to be talking a lot about some of the concepts behind processing fluency theory. Processing fluency is essentially how easy or difficult something is to mentally process. But this word can be interchangeable with the more common one, readability. And it's easier to say. Processing fluency theory basically says people prefer things that are easier to understand. This is a known phenomenon. As the processing time increases, the user experience goes from like to dislike. And it's not because they're lazy, it's efficient. It's a cognitive shortcut. For instance, cleanly designed graphs earn more trust. So if you didn't believe me before, how about now? Your brain wants to understand. And the characters in Marathon are so decked out, they become hard to understand. And if people can't understand your characters, it's harder to like them. And if we don't like them, we ain't buying your game. Even if it's for the low price of $80. Yes, people love complexity. They love puzzles. But even then, nobody wants everything that they read to be written in some cursed Lovecraftian cipher. And a character design is the same way. The more visual elements you add to a design, the more your eye has to move around to make sense of it. When looking at the Marathon characters, you may look at their eyes first, but then you'll be scanning all these logos and bits and bobs, trying to process what they all mean, assuming there's any meaning in the first place. And in the case of Marathon, maybe there's some special meaning to the artists, or you'll need like hundreds of hours of lore to decode. But to the average person, I can't tell this thing apart from a sparkle dog. Which one do I shoot? It's nonsense. If those elements are doing work, if they're actually communicating something, then this complexity can be justified. For example, at a glance, a lot of Monster Hunter designs can edge on the side of over-designed. I know that's a little controversial. If you're just looking at this image, spikes, fur, weird tails, like an actual animal doesn't look like this. But in game, you're looking at them from a different scale. As a tiny guy looking at a section of this monster at a time. The details are doing actual work. The horns and the plating, the glowing sacks, they tell you what's armored, what's weak, what's about to explode. And some of the best Monster Hunter designs can convey the functionality without looking too noisy. And that's exactly where you want to be. Having highly complex designs like the characters in Marathon doesn't just make them harder to understand, but it also diminishes their appeal. It's a delicate balance between visual complexity and conceptual depth. Visual complexity is pretty straightforward to understand, whereas conceptual depth describes the amount of underlying meaning of concepts a design represents. So from some research paper I read forever ago about logo designs, the source is, trust me, bro. There's some interesting findings when exposing viewers to logos that vary in both visual complexity and conceptual depth. Highly visually complex designs on initial viewing is rated higher, more of a wow factor. But upon repeated exposure to that complex image, people actually begin to rate it lower and lower and lower. Things of lower complexity don't have that problem. And then conceptual depth kind of gives viewers more to find in the design the longer they engage with it. And with Marathon, we might be able to describe the characters as a whole as having a lot of visual complexity, but not a lot of conceptual depth. Maybe the most we can say about them is Harley Quinn, Rogue, RoboCop, even more RoboCop. It's hard to say, honestly. So the best long-term solution for any designer is to hit a balance of low visual complexity and high conceptual depth. That's when we hit elegance. Elegance in our case would mean a design with a small number of visual elements that carry a lot of meaning. When any designer says, that's clean, that's good, the word they're looking for is elegance. I would say Superior, the grass Pokemon, is a little bit busy overall, but I would say that this grass right here is a very elegant design element. It represents grass, the shedding skin of a snake, and a collar. 3 meanings, very simple shape. This fleur-de-lis kind of ruins it a little bit though. Some art styles specifically search for elegance, like Sumi-e painting. How few of brush strokes can I use to maximize the meaning? There's no rendering of water, but you know that this crane is sitting in the water with a little bit of an island in the distance. That's elegant. This tiger I just thought was funny. Now, Glitch is a very far from elegant design. She's got a ton of complexity, but not really any conceptual depth. The most I can safely know about her is that she's a woman, and I can sniff a woman from a mile away. And maybe the artist had some sort of intent, like there's a right answer. None of these additional elements really help me to understand what they intended anyway, assuming they intended anything in the first place. The spiky hair on her is kind of cool. If you look at these characters through a scope, it might be easier to be like, that's Glitch, that's Void. It's adding a little bit of a silhouette. Beyond that though, she kind of just looks like some chick who got locked in the dumpster behind a Claire's and had to adapt to survive. She's got like headphones, the eye mask. Again, I think this X is really cool. I've never seen lips made this way, but I think a lot of this stuff is just supposed to be interchangeable with loot and costumes. And so now we're in this weird limbo between, you know, design character, personalized mannequin. So when you're stuck in this middle ground, it's hard to make a confident design decision. First thing we can do is kind of clean up some of the nonsense, just some of the little logos and things that aren't really adding anything. And maybe we can try a little bit of post hoc storytelling. We can trick the player into feeling that there's some meaning in all this visual clutter, even if we're retrofitting it in after the fact. This X, let's just say Glitch doesn't talk. Her name could be Mute. On her headphones, we could add like a mute symbol. These little zipper eyebrows kind of tie in the symbolism. Maybe at some point we can even accentuate this X on her face, make it kind of go over the entire face, really overemphasize that. But even then, we're kind of just like tweaking around at the edges. They're nice tweaks, I think, but they're band-aids. Ideally, this character needs a complete conceptual overhaul, a more defined category rather than just loud, quirky girl with attitude. That's exactly what we're gonna do with Void. So he's actually trying to represent something. You see this character, you understand what he is. He's a classic rogue. That's his category. A good way to kind of think of like a category is just like, what would somebody say to describe the character to somebody else? Like, oh, that's the rogue character, the electric mouse. That's what we mean by category. And there are tons of ways to draw a rogue, but Bungie kind of went with the most like prototypical version of a rogue. And just kind of like Glitch, his design is piled high with a bunch of just like sci-fi greebles. With Void, rather than designing another rogue, we can go strange. We can go minimal, elegant. Let's get weird. A distinct category can make the character feel more iconic. The first thing I saw when I saw this big old chunk sticking out of his head, my first thought was, that looks like an anvil. So I went with Anvil head! What do you think of that? Yay? Nay? Now we've got strong, readable shapes. The silhouette reads, and we can have a little space for a little decal. I put like 10 ton. And that long, sharp nose might look weird at first, but I think it adds distinction. A good way to add distinction on a character is give them a strong or interesting nose. It also adds more conceptual depth because now it can look like he's sniffing. He could be a tracker. It kind of gives him a shark look. You know, he's smelling blood in the water. And we can also make it more conceptually deep by adding mechanical reasoning. Perhaps he has a resistance to headshots. So say what you want, but at least it's not over-designed. And it gets to the point where if we start taking stuff away, we start to lose meaning. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to fix this character, and I'm not even saying it's the best. It's just the Addy way. No matter what angle you're coming from, I just want to get one thing across, okay? Character design, or at least good character design, isn't just decoration. It's language. And when it's done right, it speaks. The music is not in the notes, but in the silence between. And that's Elvis. What you leave out matters just as much as what you put in.